All right, good evening, everyone. Allison Scoberg here. We're here with the ADA support group. This is an ADHD support group for parents with children with ADHD. There are ADA support groups all across the Houston area. Some serve adults, some serve, adolescents, and some serve parents. And so you can look on the Houston website. They do have a Facebook page as well. So we meet once a month, and since the pandemic, we used to meet face to face, but since the pandemic, we have been meeting by Zoom. I think everybody's accustomed and pretty used to Zoom right now. But this group is it's a free group. You don't have to join. We always do advocate and suggest joining the mothership of the ADA support group because they do put a ton of resources out there for our families, and they have an annual conference that bounces back and forth between Houston and Dallas, and they bring big speakers in from all across the country. So if this group has been of help to you, or you feel like it can be in the future, we would love for you to join. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. Your cameras are muted and your microphones are muted, but we know you're there and we're glad you're here. So as we're going through tonight's presentation, if you have questions, we ask that you put them in the chat box. Our speaker tonight is Jessica Hernandez with the Missouri City Family Counseling Center. We're familiar with this. For those of you that are new to us tonight, we are co-leader of this group. With me was Lindsay Asawa previously, and she's a co-owner of that business in Missouri City. So, and of course, Lindsay has been a speaker with us in the past. So Jessica, we are super excited to have you here tonight. I do think she has some interactive slides where she may ask for some feedback or some thoughts, and we do ask that you participate by putting your information in the chat box. Again, tonight is being recorded, and tomorrow you'll get an email with the recording, and if there was any other attachments or a PDF of the presentation or anything like that we talk about tonight, that'll be in the email as well. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. And if you're planning supper or kids or anything else, we will be done by 7:30. So Jessica, having said that, thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm going to just turn it right on over to you.
Thank you, Allison. That was a very nice introduction. I'm very glad to be joining you all this evening, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us. Hopefully, we'll have some helpful information for you in this presentation. So tonight we're talking about calm and confidence in the chaos, self-care strategies for parents of children with ADHD. So why is this important to talk about? Why is it important to maintain our calm? So opposite of calm is stress, right? We all know that when we're under stress, our brains are not working quite as well as when we're calm. So there's actually a release of a stress hormone that takes over, and it's very helpful in certain situations. For example, in life-threatening situations, it helps us respond quickly and deal with that. But when we have this release of a stress chemical in our brain all the time or pretty continuous instead of in short bursts, it actually impairs our brain from working to its best. And what happens is our emotions take over. So when you're dealing with frustrations that come up with your child who is struggling with ADHD, that frustration can take over, and it actually causes the part of our brain that is responsible for our executive functioning, our reasoning, our logic, our thinking through our options. It causes that part of our brain to kind of go offline. And then our emotions take over, and that's when we might do or say things that later on we wish we hadn't said or done, or we think, gosh, maybe that wasn't the best way to handle it. Maybe I could have said that in a different way that would have been more helpful. That's why it's important to keep our calm. I also kind of think of that old saying when you're on an airplane and they always tell you if we lose pressure and the masks come down, to put your mask on first before you help those around you, right? Because you're not going to be able to help anyone if you have passed out, right? So this is kind of that same idea, is that we have to take care of ourselves in order to stay calm, in order to feel confident in ourselves, and that will allow us to help take care of other people. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. That's just a little bit about our therapy center.
Can I just ask, Jessica, one thing and I know you're going to get into your presentation, but as it relates to Missouri City Family Counseling, are they taking new patients right now? We're seeing a lot of places that do provide therapy are not, they have long wait lists. Some are not even taking a wait list anymore because it's so long. Tell us if they are accepting patients and if there are any types of insurance that are accepted.
Yes, that's a great question. So we are taking new patients, although we do have a little bit of a wait list, but depending on what specifically you're looking for, we can get people in fairly quickly. In terms of insurance, we take Blue Cross Blue Shield and UHC. So we do have some options for that. And we have a therapist who specialize in working with children who have ADHD and helping the families learn how to manage that. With the title family counseling, you think, oh, it's just family counseling, but we do individual counseling as well. We also at times have groups, and we work with young kids all the way through adults.
My last question before we move on from this, do you guys also have a psychiatrist? Because obviously the to medicate or not to medicate is a question that is always surrounding this group all the time. Do you guys have a psychiatrist that is affiliated with your firm as well, or with your office?
We do not have a psychiatrist, but we can help families find a psychiatrist in the community who we've had experience working with. So we kind of have a network of psychiatrists we can refer to. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Okay, so we're going to talk today about what exactly is self-care. We're going to talk a little bit about how to deal with our inner critic. Then we're going to talk about, well, how do we actually implement self-care in our daily lives? And then we're going to do a little guided imagery activity at the end. So we need to cultivate a state of calm and confidence within ourselves, right? Because the chaos isn't going to go away, unfortunately. Sometimes there's more chaos, sometimes there's less chaos, but we know that's just part of life. There's going to be stress, there's going to be chaos. So it's important to cultivate that sense of calm within ourselves, because we can't always change what's going on around us. So how do we do that? How do we cultivate that sense of calm and confidence? The way we do that is through self-care. Now, self-care is kind of a buzzword. Everybody's like, oh, I'm going to do some self-care. I'm going to do some self-care. But a lot of people are like, I don't exactly know what that means. What exactly is self-care? So the core of self-care is taking care of our physical, emotional, and psychological health. It's also important to think of self-care as it's not something that is going to cause us harm in any way. So some people might think of self-care as, going to happy hour every night, right? Or maybe they really like to go shopping. So those things are okay in moderation, but those are things that could lead to bigger problems if you're not careful. So when you think about self-care, you're really thinking of something that is nurturing, yourself, and it's not going to create any kind of larger problems for you in the future. Okay, so let's talk about the physical health part of self-care, and what are some examples of this? What does this look like? So this is getting enough sleep. So I know that's a struggle for everyone, getting enough sleep, but it's so important to reset your brain and your body. So getting your sleep every night, eating nutritious meals, so not just, fast food, but getting the vitamins and nutrients you need, but also having at least 3 meals a day or whatever your diet calls for, but being sure that you're making time for those meals. Exercising regularly, that is a wonderful way to take care of your body and relieve stress. Personal hygiene, so showering, making time for that, making time for brushing your teeth, making time for, doing whatever you need to do to take care of your personal hygiene. Sometimes that is easy to kind of let go when we have all of these other demands on our time. Taking care of our physical health also looks like going to the doctor. So doing those regular visits, doing those routine, yearly exams, going to the doctor when you're not feeling well, getting things checked out, listening to your body to know, like, something's going on, something's not right. I'm gonna take care of myself by going to the doctor and trying to figure out what's going on. And then also resting. So when we're sick, actually allowing ourselves to rest. I mean, how many of us are sick and we just trudge through it, right? It's like, well, I have too many responsibilities. I have to go to work. My kids are counting on me. Who else is going to do this? I'm just going to push through it. But practicing good self-care is allowing yourself that time to rest when you are not well. Okay, let's look next at what does it look like to take care of our emotional health? So this one, it's really important that you're acknowledging and allowing yourself the space and time to feel all of your emotions. That's a tough one because a lot of us, we don't want to feel the emotions that don't feel so good, right? You don't want to feel sad or angry or worried. You might try and push those things away. But the truth is that when we don't allow ourselves to experience our feelings, it actually makes them get bigger. And so the only way to really make them smaller and manageable is to allow yourself to experience them. So that's a big part of our emotional health. Another part is nurturing yourself, showing yourself compassion when, maybe you forgot to do something, or you're being hard on yourself, or maybe other people are being hard on you. Really showing yourself that compassion and taking care of yourself, and also nurturing others. Spending quality time with friends and family is so important for our emotional health. I think that a lot of us have learned that through the past year or so with COVID, that disconnection is really hard. We need that face-to-face time. We need that quality time. We're wired to be social creatures. And so when we are lacking that, it really affects our emotional health. Another important thing is connecting to a larger community. Again, as social beings, it's important for us to have that sense of belonging, that sense of being part of a group, and that support system. So important for us. Another part of our emotional health is giving back and helping others. Any of you who have had the opportunity to do that in some way, maybe you volunteer or just helping a friend or a neighbor in need, you know how rewarding that is. It makes us feel good to be able to help other people. And then also just feeling loved and accepted. So having relationships in your life where you feel like you're not judged, where you feel like you are accepted for who you are and that you're loved for who you are. So important for our emotional health.
Jessica, can you give us some tips for the families that are just feeling overwhelmed? So in theory, we're all smart people and we know these things, but then life gets in the way, kids get in the way, crisis gets in the way. There's a lot of things. So for instance, someone said over the last couple of weeks about being intentional to having that spouse time. So whether it's you have a drink with a spouse or you sit outside for an hour or 30 minutes or something without interruption, or intentional dating or something where the conversation isn't about all the crisis that surrounds the ADHD kid or the mental health, circumstances or some of the other things, but it's just like kind of being present in the moment. Can you give us some other tips and ideas? So if we're not here and we're struggling with all the other things that are going on, what are some baby steps to help us start to get to this place where you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're going to talk a little bit later too about some more ideas on how to do that, because I know it's such a challenge. One of the things, so that example that you brought up, like how do we have our spouse time and not have it taken over by our conversations about our child or our struggles with ADHD and our family. So, the important thing is schedule a time to talk about that. And then schedule a time not to talk about that, but to have that time just for you and your spouse to reconnect. And it might not be a lot of time. Sometimes we think, oh, we have to go make a date night and we've got to, go to a concert and we've got to go out to dinner and all of this. But you can actually find ways to do that in small little bits. So if you can find 5 minutes of your day, maybe it's the 5 minutes that you guys wake up in the morning. Maybe you spend 5 minutes just kind of having that time to connect and not talk about other stuff. Or maybe it's easier to make that time during your workday and you're able to connect with a phone call, and you both just have to remember this is the time for us to connect and not talk about the other stuff, as much as we may be tempted. And then this is a great place too to also practice that self-compassion, because you'll talk about that other stuff, right? It's like, okay, we know this is our time, but then conversations about the other stuff going on in the family are going to seep in. So remind each other, hey, remember this is our time to just connect with each other and not talk about those things. So show yourself some self-compassion by recognizing I'm going to slip up sometimes as I'm learning how to do that, and it's okay. Okay, so taking care of our mental health is also important, and all of these things are really interconnected. But to take care of our mental health, we really need to know who we are and accept ourselves for who we are. So this ties in with the next point on here, being guided by our values and beliefs. So really being able to stay in touch with what's important to us, what matters to us, what our priorities are, what our beliefs are, not letting those things, get sidetracked because of the chaos that's going on in your life. Another important thing is finding that balance between taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. So taking care of you, there has to be a place for that. You can't only be focused on taking care of your spouse or taking care of your kids or taking care of whatever you're doing at work. You have to find that balance of taking care of yourself. Again, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to help other people the best way that you can. Another part of taking care of our mental health is using healthy strategies for coping with stress. And so, this would be maybe not going to happy hour every day. That might not be the healthiest strategy, but maybe it's doing yoga. Maybe that's a healthy strategy for you. Or maybe it's taking a walk. Maybe reconnecting with nature is a strategy for you. So finding some healthy ways of coping. Another really important part of our mental health self-care is being flexible and adaptable. So think about the past year with COVID. We've had to be really flexible and adaptable. And even if you look at businesses, the businesses that have done well and been able to succeed even in this very difficult environment have done it because they have been able to adapt. They've been able to be flexible with how they do business, and they've been able to kind of roll with the punches. That's the same for us that we need to be able to do in our daily lives in order to take care of our mental health. And then last, and this is super important, recognizing what's in your control and what's not, right? If we're exerting all this energy trying to fix something that's not even in our capability to change, then that's creating more stress that we don't need. So if you can accept what you can't control and just focus on the things that you can control, that's going to help your mental health. Okay, so before we get to talking about how exactly do we do this, we do have to talk about the inner critic in the room and why. Why do we have to talk about this? First of all, we all have an inner critic. All of us do. Some of us have bigger ones than others. That's okay. But the reason it's important for us to talk about this while we're talking about self-care is because our inner critic can sabotage our efforts at self-care. And our inner critic is often rooted in feelings of shame and guilt. And, a lot of times that may go all the way back to our childhood. And shame, I don't know, how much you guys might have read about shame or heard about shame. I would encourage you, if you're interested, to check out Dr. Brene Brown. You may have heard of her, but she is at the University of Houston, and she's done a lot of research on shame, and it's really helpful to learn more about it and to be able to recognize what our shame triggers are. And the reason for that is shame is us believing that there is something inherently wrong with us, that we're somehow defective, that we're not worthy of love or acceptance. Those are really deep-rooted feelings. And so when we have shame, we do a lot of things to try and hide it. And the things that we do to hide it can be things that create more issues for us. So it might lead to some unhealthy coping strategies, or it may lead us to become very defensive, to have difficulty controlling our emotions, because we're trying to kind of keep this secret of whatever we feel shame about. So I encourage you to look into it more if it's something that interests you. But this is the reason why we're talking a little bit about the inner critic. So we can go to the next slide, because we're going to dive into the inner critic a little bit more. So we're actually going to do a little bit of this right now. So the first thing you need to do to tame this inner critic, actually, let me backtrack here for a second. I forgot to tell you, the inner critic is actually trying to protect us. So I know that's hard to believe, because a lot of times it doesn't feel like that. But it's this part of us that is trying to protect us from something that it feels like is going to be hurtful to us. So just kind of understanding that it's coming from a place of good intention. even though it may be doing it in a way that is not helpful at all, there is a good intention behind it. So what I would like for you to do now is think about, what is something that your inner critic says to you? And I don't know if you have paper with you or not. If you do, or some way to write it down, you can write it down, or you can just kind of think about it in your head. If you would like to, you could put it in the chat box to kind of give an example of an inner critic voice that you have, because probably there are other people who might have something similar too. So
can you give us, kick us off a little with a little starter, maybe like kind of like a, for example of the inner critic?
Yes, great idea. So something an inner critic might say is, you're a terrible parent. You're terrible. You're terrible at parenting, or your failure as a parent, or you can't do anything right, or you don't know what you're doing, or you can't handle this. You're not smart enough. You should. Inner critics like to should on us a lot. So you should be able to handle all of this. You shouldn't be struggling with all of these responsibilities. You should be smart.
So I'll share mine. I always look at the faults instead of celebrating the wins. Like, I think when we have like these big issues, maybe it's just my house, but anyway, I assume that you're here because the struggle is real. But I catch myself, and I don't know, I mean, I don't know it's so much as an inner critic, as opposed to wanting myself to be the best self I can be and the best parent I could be. So like catching myself trying, so the self-talk as I look at faults instead of celebrating the wins. And sometimes the faults are many, right? So, so it's easy to live in that world. And so I don't know. So that's just one, but I try to be mindful of that. But I'd love to hear somebody else's, where they're at with this.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And we don't really have time to go into this as much as we could in this presentation, but there's a category of unhelpful thinking, really, called cognitive distortions. And so one of them, kind of what you're talking about, is minimizing the good. So whenever something positive happens, you might minimize it and look for the faults or look for the bad. Another one is all or nothing thinking. So thinking, I never get anything right. I always screw up. Whereas in reality, that's not actually true if you look at the facts. Or, overgeneralizing is another one. So, you have an experience maybe with one person, and then you generalize it to everyone. So it's like, oh, that one person doesn't like me. Nobody likes me. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can Google it, cognitive distortions, and all the examples will come up. And that might be helpful for you too, to kind of target that inner critic.
We have a comment, and just for the sake of privacy, I won't say names or anything like that. But the comment is, I worry about what negativity I have placed on my children instead of remembering where I encouraged and uplifted them. That is such a strong comment. And I have to tell you personally, I have definitely felt the same way. And I've even thought about like people that, in your own journey as a human, right? People that have lifted you up, or people that have, push you down or whatever. And one thing that I've always said is that I didn't want to crush my child's spirit. So because that spirit is kind of awesome, like, she just hasn't grown into all that awesomeness yet, but like there's so much greatness. Lindsay talks about the ADHD superpowers, like she's talked about that before. And that is so true. But sometimes it's hard. And in our parenting, I mean, you definitely feel like you're like the spirit crusher at times. And that's definitely not what we strive to be. But at the end of the day, you're tired and it's like the drama never ends. And it's like, I don't know. So anyway, you're definitely not alone. What do you think about that, Jessica?
Yeah, I think like focusing on those negative things and forgetting about all of the positive and encouraging things that you've said and done for your child, right? And then that becomes overwhelming for you because all you're remembering is the negative stuff, and then you're thinking about how has that affected my child, and this isn't what my intention was of how I wanted to impact them, but you've completely forgotten about all the positive things that you've said and done.
But what about the balance in that? I mean, because the reality of our kids, and I certainly I can't speak for everybody's kids because everybody's different, but we have some serious behavior issues, and we have maturity issues, which contribute to the behavior issues. So there's this push-pull as a parent of effective parenting, and not letting them buy with everything, and sometimes it's hard to pick your battles wisely. So how do you help us find balance in that? Because it's not as simple, like as just I don't know. Maybe it's not that simple. Does that make sense?
It's not simple at all. It's really hard, right? It's really, really hard. And sometimes being able to reframe too, right? It's like the stuff where you have to be hard on your kids. You have to enforce things. They need to follow certain rules, right? They need to learn how to do certain things. Reframing that too can sometimes help. That, yes, this is a struggle and this isn't necessarily what I want to do, but also this is something that is going to help my child be successful in life. So even if it's hard to do it right now, to enforce it, to feel like you have to crush their spirit in some way, is this something that in the long run, you're actually going to be setting them up to be successful? And then another thing I think too is, finding ways to also just remind yourself of all the positive things that you've done so that you're not always focusing on the negative, because you do have to have a balance, right? But if you're only focusing on the stuff that feels negative, you're losing all of the positive ways that you're supporting them and encouraging them, So finding ways to remind yourself, even if it's just at the end of the day, saying, okay, what did I do or say for my child today that was really encouraging and supportive? That can be a way to.
I think of that acronym, and I'll put it in the chat box. And it's something that I've used with my kids in the past. The think before you speak. Is it true for the T? Is it helpful for the H? Is it inspiring? Mm-hmm. Is it necessary? Is it kind? And I think that holds true for adults too, adults in the workplace and your household with your kids. And because our kids are so impulsive and they say things that they shouldn't say and they lose friends and other things happen. That is something that we have regularly used. I mean, you can print this out, stick it on your refrigerator, but I think it's something that's enough to cause for pause to think about that as you're angry, as you're escalating. out of frustration, the think acronym, I think, helps. I don't know. I like that one.
That's a great one, and it's easy to remember. So I think that's a great tool to use. And yeah, write it down, have it on sticky notes in the house to remind yourself and other people, other family members. And then it can be something you do as a family too, which is a learning opportunity. So once you can identify what your inner critic is saying to you, first of all, you might notice that there are certain themes. There might be some kind of theme of like a fear of failure, or a theme connecting back to your own childhood experiences. And so having that awareness is helpful, because then you can kind of catch it when your inner critic is saying these things to you, and you can challenge it. So here, the think acronym is a great way to really think through your thoughts. And I put some questions on here that can also help you evaluate what that inner critic voice is saying, and challenging it, because a lot of times that voice is not based in reality. It's based in our own feelings of shame and guilt and past experiences. So some of the questions. So if you have identified a specific statement that your inner critic says to you, you can go ahead and answer this to yourself as I'm going through these questions. So first question is, what evidence do I have to support this thought or belief? Is there any evidence to support this, right? What is it? If so, are there other possible explanations or points of view for this? Is there another possibility? Is there another explanation? Is this thought helpful? Is it helpful? Is it unhelpful? Am I making assumptions? We all make a lot of assumptions about things, so that's important to check in. Am I making assumptions? What else may have contributed to this situation? There may be other people who have some impact on this situation, or who have contributed, or other situations that have contributed to this inner critic voice. Am I making this personal when it isn't personal? We tend to personalize things a lot. We make things about ourselves when it's really not about us at all. And of course, when we make things personal, that's when our emotions get triggered, and that's when they can start to take over the logical thinking part of our brain. What would I say to a friend having this thought or belief? So if your best friend said, my inner critic is telling me this, what would you say in response to that? That can be a great question to use for many different situations, is to think about, if I had a friend in this situation, what would I say? Am I holding myself to unreasonable expectations? I think that we do that a lot, right? We expect ourselves to be able to do everything. So check in. Is this expectation that I had reasonable? Is it doable? Is it possible? And then finally, is this really in my control? Right? So there are things that happen that aren't in our control. We can't always control how other people respond to us. We can't control decisions maybe that the school makes. We can't control our kids' behavior. I mean, honestly, the only real things we can control are ourselves. So we try to influence our kids.
But don't you think that the inner critic, though, is like, I don't know, sometimes I view the inner critic not as a negative, but as a positive, to be my better self, right? So it's not being self-critical, it's being realistic and saying, hey, I could do a better job at these things, and I can only fix me. I can't fix other people. And looking at the situation from a realistic perspective, I could do a better job at these things. So it's not necessarily being an inner critic. It's being a realist of maybe, you know, like the reality of your own situation and how you could improve. I don't know. I find balance with that. Like, I don't feel like it's a Debbie Downer, but an opportunity for improvement for myself as a person or as a parent or in whatever capacity.
Well, Allison, I think that you are doing an awesome job because you're at the point where you found a balance with your inner critic. I don't know if y'all remember earlier, I said your inner critic is actually trying to protect you, right? It's actually trying to help you. So when we can find a way to have it actually be helpful and not critical, right? Then it is important to have. So we're not trying to get rid of it. We're trying to have it give us thoughts that are based in reality, first of all, right? So they're accurate and helpful thoughts. So not the super critical, the thoughts where we're able to recognize, you know what, maybe I didn't handle this the best way. Maybe I could do better, but also balancing that with the self-compassion, right? Of I'm doing the best I can. I did the best I could in that situation with what I had, or, you know, I did the best I could and I made a mistake. And now I can learn from that mistake. So I think you bring up a good point, Allison, is, you know, it's not this horrible thing, but we need to find that balance of self-compassion with that inner critic voice that is accurate and based in reality and helpful. So yeah, let's go to the next one. Okay, so and the last one, so we start to get into that a little bit too, is when you find yourself, maybe that inner critic voice is really critical and you're not at the point that Allison is at where you're able to have that balance. It's helpful to challenge that inner critic voice with positive self-talk. And I like this quote here: the more man meditates upon good thoughts, the better will be his world and the world at large. So when we focus on, actually whatever we focus on is the thing that grows. So if we choose to focus more on negative thoughts, they're going to keep getting bigger, and the positive thoughts, they're going to get smaller. When we choose to focus on the positive, that gets bigger. Right? It's like we're watering that plant when we're focusing on it. So the negative thoughts are going to get smaller. So you can challenge that inner critic voice with positive self-talk, like I'm doing the best that I can, or I'm good enough. I don't need to be perfect. I'm good enough. It's okay to make mistakes. You are learning. You're learning as you go, and that's okay. So there are lots of different ways you can incorporate positive self-talk. And some people will even use a mantra to help them. So people who feel like they have to be perfect, for example, that statement of I am good enough, or I am perfect as I am. They might say that to themselves every day as a reminder, just to help reinforce those positive thoughts. That's something else, if you want to look up there, you can Google. There are lots of positive affirmations or positive mantras. If you're having trouble thinking of one, but you think that would be helpful, you can find it online. You can find those. Okay, so let's get to how do we actually make time? This all sounds great and wonderful, but how do we actually make this happen? I know it's a challenge. It is. We're not going to pretend that it's not a challenge. And so again, that self-compassion is going to be so important because you have to recognize that there are going to be times where you're intending to do that self-care and it's not happening. And you have to give yourself that permission to not be perfect at it, to recognize it's not always going to go the way that you had planned or wanted. So the first thing that's important is prioritize. So to make this happen, you have to prioritize it, right? It's got to be something on your list. This is one of the most important things I need to do each day for myself. Prioritizing also means recognizing what things you can let go, right? Like choosing your battles, what's most important. Especially, when you have kids and they're struggling with many different things, choosing your battles, trying to get them on track with every single thing, it's overwhelming, right? So choosing a few things to focus on at a time and then figuring out what can I let go right now? Is this really important in the moment that my child, does this chore right now, or that my child follow this direction or whatever? That's going to be different for each of you, what your priorities are, but you have to figure out what can I let go? Because if everything is important, then nothing is important, right? So you have to figure that out. Next, you need to learn your internal cues. So you really need to figure out those signals that your body sends out that you're really getting stressed. And again, that's going to look different for everybody. It might be like you get headaches, or you have difficulty. Some people have difficulty with their stomach; it gets upset. Maybe tension in your muscles, like your shoulder, your neck gets tight. So everybody has different cues. So you need to be able to pick up on those. So, okay, hey, I need to take a break and do some self-care here, or I've been neglecting it. I need to get back to it. Another thing, use technology to your advantage. We've all become better with technology in the last year or so, whether we like it or not, but use it to your advantage. So, there are a lot of different apps out there, if you're not using them already, where you can put chores on there. You can put shopping lists. You can do things to help organize your household that everybody in the family can have access to, so you don't have to keep reminding people, hey, remember to clean your room, remember to do this, remember to do that. Put it in technology so that you don't have to keep remembering to do it or to remind people, so you can make it a team effort for your family. Also, automate whatever you can. So automate your bills, automate really anything that can be automated that you feel comfortable doing. One less thing for you to worry about. Another thing where you can make time for self-care is get your kids involved. I know you might want to break from them, and that's an option too. But one thing you can do is involve them in the self-care, because then you're making it part of your family, but it's also a great way to model for them and to teach them how to do their own self-care, right? So if your self-care is doing, a certain kind of exercise, maybe like riding bikes or doing yoga or doing karate or going for walks, going hiking, going fishing, whatever it is that you like to do, get your children involved and make them part of it. That's a great way to really model for them the importance of self-care. Next one is find support and ask for help. So if you can have, not all of us are in a position where we can do this, but anything that other people could do for you, like, take care of your lawn, get your groceries delivered or do the curbside pickup. You can get someone to clean your house. I know not everybody's in a position to be able to do those things, but anything like that, unless it's something that you do for self-care. I know some people like to clean or mow the yard and that's part of their self-care, then you do that. But any other tasks or chores like that you can outsource, do it, because that's going to take less stress off of you and create more time for you to take care of yourself.
I like to add that I think that it is important to find people that you can talk to about your world, that understand your world because they're living in it too. Maybe their kids are a little bit older, maybe their kids are around the same age, but I have found, so I think this group was started, 5 or 6 years ago. Lindsay and I started this group, and just, being a part of a group of people that have similar circumstances, I guess I want to say, there's just been so many resources that have been shared, and just if you actually just even walk away and know that you're not alone, that other parents are going through this, it's not just chaos at your house. But I think sometimes there's the stigma, whether it's mental illness, whether it's ADHD or whatever, and oftentimes you don't find yourself talking to other people, clearly people that don't understand, that don't live it, right? So I would say finding that, one or two, people that you can relate to or kind of talk through some of this stuff, I find that helpful.
Yeah, that's so helpful because, again, you can learn from them. They might have ideas that you don't know about. You can share your resources and ideas that you know about with them. But yeah, having that connection and feel like somebody else gets this. Somebody else gets what I'm going through. It's not just me. That's so powerful. So yeah, finding some kind of support system like that is wonderful. And then the last way to incorporate self-care, which I think is so important to remember. We often think of self-care as like, oh, it's going on vacation, it's having a spa day, or, big ticket item things. Yeah, that's important for self-care, but that's more like the icing on the cake. The self-care that is really, really important is the self-care you do every day. And it doesn't have to be a big, expenditure of money or time. It can be 5 minutes, take a break at work, go to the restroom and do some deep breathing. That's part of self-care, and incorporating it in little bits and pieces throughout the day is so, so helpful, because that's going to help keep your stress at bay, help keep the calm all day. Whereas if you just wait to the weekend or something, it's already built up a lot, right? So little bits and pieces of it throughout the day. Maybe it's just, going outside at work, on your lunch break, talking to a friend, doing a stretch in the morning. Pick one stretch that you like and you do it in the morning when you wake up. So it doesn't have to be this big event. It can be these little tiny pieces of it. The important thing is you have to figure out what you need for self-care, right? What are the things that are really going to help you? Because it's going to look different for everybody. And I can't tell you exactly what to do because mine is different than yours. So it's a little bit of experimenting too. So
I would say like trying new things too. And I think a lot of us have tried new things. Obviously we've tried our hand at a lot of new things with COVID, right? But one thing that I started since COVID, I've always loved reading, but then you get busy with life and work, or you have to read a lot for work, so you don't end up. But I actually started reading, not self-help books, not anything that I'm going to learn from, but, just fiction books. And it's crazy how just that small activity of books, I bet you I've read 70 books over this pandemic, right? Like just because it's just been enjoyment. It's like, you're lost in some other story and it's interesting and it's intriguing and you keep, so it's something small. It could be anything, just to walk around the block with the dog. The dog likes it. You get some fresh air and a little exercise. I mean, it's just those little things that all add up. But as we were more and more, stuck in our homes, and certainly, I've talked to many people with the story of homeschooling 3 kids under 10 while trying to work full time, and balance this and no sitter or nanny and things like that. Yeah, I mean, just the little things, whatever you could sneak in there really, really definitely mattered. So I think that's all good feedback for sure.
They do add up. They do add up. So I'm going to, real quick, we're going to do a guided imagery. So this might be something that you add to your toolbox of self-care if you find it helpful. So as we do this, I'm going to ask you some questions, but these are just for you to kind of answer to yourself. So get comfortable in your chair. Take a few deep breaths. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes or just find a soft place to stare in the room. And I want you to think about a place where you feel calm and peaceful. This place could be a real place that you've been to. It could be a place that you've never been to, but you've always wanted to go to. Or it could be a completely imaginary place. The important thing about this place, it's this place that you don't have any negative memories or thoughts connected to. So once you find that place, continue to take deep breaths. And I want you to imagine that you're there in that place. And I want you to look around. Just notice what you see. What's around you? What colors do you see? Are there other people there with you? Or are you by yourself? Really listen to what's going on in this place. Are there any sounds that you hear? Or is it quiet? Take a deep breath. Notice how the air smells in this place. What does it smell like? Notice how the air feels on your skin. Does it feel warm? Maybe it's humid. Maybe there's a cool breeze blowing across your skin. Maybe you feel a little cold, or maybe you feel just comfortable enough. Notice what you're doing in this place. Notice, is there anything you can reach out and touch? Maybe you feel under your feet. Notice how it feels. Something that feels hard or soft. And then just notice how your body feels as you imagine yourself in this place. Notice the feelings that come up for you. And when you're ready, deep breaths. You can open your eyes and come back into your room. Okay, so that is our calm place, guided imagery. If that was helpful for you, I encourage you to keep doing that. You can do it anywhere, anytime. And if you need a little help remembering, you can always Google and you'll find it there. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found this helpful. I've really enjoyed being with you all this evening.
Jessica, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And again, if any of your families are struggling, whether you need family counseling, marriage counseling, or your kiddos need counseling, do reach out to Missouri City Family Counseling, as they do have some openings, which I'm definitely happy to hear. And Jessica, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us tonight. Again, you guys will get an email with the recording of the presentation, a little bit more information on how to join the ADHD ADA support group. I think it's $40 a year. It's not anything crazy. And then you'll be in on all of the webinars and anything that's happening, and also the conferences that happen as well. We're certainly happy to be here with you tonight. If you are joining us for the first time, we're glad you attended. We have a different speaker every single month on every topic that you could possibly imagine, from medicine to a new diagnosis to parenting to, I mean, we've just had everything out there possible, but we definitely have a new speaker every single month. So we hope that you will join us again. And we meet the last Tuesday of every month. And there might be some exceptions for like Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff like that, but we definitely put an email out there for it. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good night, and we'll be back with you again soon. Take care. Bye now.